We always feel poor because you sell an asset, you get a bunch of money, and then it just goes towards buying another asset. And the cycle is constant. I think what I'm most excited for this next phase in my career is to stop the bleeding and just make money.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the 0 to 100 podcast show. I'm here today with my co-host, Mitchell England, Travis Dillard, and we have an amazing guest today, my good friend, Leka Devatha. Leka moved to the U.S. from India, started in the corporate world at Nordstrom, and then made a huge pivot into real estate. Fast forward to today, she's the president of Rehabit Homes, has done over 100 million in transactions. It has built a name for herself as a top developer, broker, and speaker in the industry. She's emceed events like Bigger Pockets. I've never heard of Bigger Pockets. Just kidding. Been featured on major media outlets and runs a killer networking event called Real Estate at Work. Can't wait to dive into your story, Leka. Very excited to have you on, and welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast show.
I'm just so excited to hang out with the three of you. I wish this was in person, but I'll take a video call.
Me too. Before we were recording, we're just talking about how it's been way too long since we've all been hanging out together. So it's better to have you in person, but it's nice to have you on camera as well.
Yes, for sure.
Let's get into your story a little bit. We're all real estate investors. The focus of our show is really buying whole cash flow real estate to achieve not just financial freedom, but time freedom. And I know you have your hands in like everything real estate. So I'd like to hear, kind of how'd you get into real estate? Because before real estate, you were working a corporate job. And I think, we do have a lot of listeners that maybe they're stuck in a corporate job and they see real estate as a way to get out of the rat race and achieve some financial freedom and ultimately time freedom to live the life that they want. And so I'm curious of your story. How do you find yourself in corporate America, but also how'd you find your way out?
Yes. So I moved to the country about 18 years ago. I was born and raised in India, but then you guys have met Vijay, my husband. He lived here. And then when we met and I moved here, I came into the land of tech because I live in Seattle without a tech degree. And that was such, it was a hindrance, but luckily for me, Nordstrom was headquartered in Seattle, and I came from the fashion merchandising background back in India. And so it was a very nice, easy transition into Nordstrom corporate. After working there about 7 years, I realized that I am a true entrepreneur in my core, that corporate America was just not for me. And so I decided to switch lanes, but I didn't know what to do. And so literally on my way to work one day, I heard a radio ad for a house flipping company. And I was so intrigued that I had to go check them out. And I went and did a seminar like so many of us do. And then most people don't take action. For me, I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, this is what I want to do. And so soon after that, I started my company, Rehabit Homes. I quit my corporate job. And I had my first house flip within about 4 or 5 months from going to that seminar.
Let's talk about that, because we've talked about, I used to go to all these free, like run of the back of the classroom seminars. I never paid for the upsell, but I would always like get some information.
Yeah.
Some of them, it was like great information. Some felt very like scammy. Do you remember what seminar it was? And then, you said you took action and 4 months later, you're flipping a home. I don't think that's the normal path. Most people go to those and then they do nothing.
Right. So I think the difference was I did get sucked into the upsell. The seminar was Fortune Builders. They're very famous across the nation and they're really good educators, which is what I liked about them. But it was also a way, like I had spent, this was 11 years ago, I spent 25 grand to join their 6-month program. That was a lot of money. It was like a third of what I was making in corporate America. And B, I think it just gave me the network I needed to kind of use as a stepping stone towards everything else. And so in that seminar, I was local in Seattle. I met so many Seattle investors. I didn't think there was any Seattle investor that I could connect with, and they were. And that was super cool because it kind of opened the doors for me on who my friends were going to be in the industry.
You said something that I wanted to cue on. You said $25,000, which is a 30-year salary. That's a lot of money. But like you talked about the education, which is great, but you mentioned the network. And I think people underestimate that because like $25,000 to go learn something, I could use ChatGPT to learn that. And we harp on this all the time. It's the network that you plug into. I'm just curious, like, how did that network give you success? How did it lead to that first flip, subsequent flips? Because people are listening like, well, what do you mean network? Like to us, that's like every day, like network. We're all about network. That is our net worth. But a lot of people that are working corporate America that just sort of surround themselves with their buddies. They don't, they watch the football games on Sunday, nothing against football. But I'm just saying like, what about that network led to your success and it led you to take action? Because to Gabe's point, a lot of people don't take action. They spend the money and then they go back to work.
For me, honestly, my entire career in real estate has been because of my network. It's because of my network that I found deals. It's because of my network that I found money, because of my network that I found inspiration. And to the point where today I host like one of the best meetups in the city, which kind of allows people to have that network. So I'm a big believer of network. Back then, what it did to me or did for me was that I was absolutely green. I, first of all, didn't grow up here, so I didn't have like deep-rooted connections. I didn't speak the language, and I was going from fashion to real estate. It wasn't like I was going from construction or finance into real estate. It was completely, they were worlds apart. And so what I really needed was I needed to see people doing this to show me that it was possible for someone like me to do it. Because back when I first started in 2014, there was a lot of cash buyers. People would show up to auctions with a briefcase full of cash. And
like a literal briefcase of cash.
Literally, I've seen them bring a briefcase of cash to the auction steps and they're like, we'll buy this all cash. Here's our...
What?
My gosh.
Like a dirty duffel bag full of cash. That's
like, where'd you get that cash?
You're worried about it.
Jeez.
Yeah. I was like, I wish I had a duffel bag of cash.
You're like, man, I need to be in that business. So what's he doing?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
So, I was competing with those people and I'm like, why would anybody send me the deal? But it was going to these networking events and meeting other women, meeting people that were just getting started to see, okay, if they can find a way, then I'm sure I can find a way.
So I want to go back a little bit. What was it like? Were you scared? Did you feel prepared because of this education? I think leaving the W-2 job is such a massive leap because the W-2, although I don't feel like it's a true security, in our brains, we feel like it's a secure thing. It's a constant check. You get your 401k, you have your healthcare, you have your sort of network of colleagues in the W-2. I always feel like the leap from a W-2 to full-time entrepreneur is a scary thing for most people. For me, it felt risky. Maybe talk about your mindset there. What did that feel like?
Yeah, I mean, there's no roadmap, right? You're just literally trying to figure this out and put one step in front of the other. I think for me, it was super exhilarating. I liked the risk. I liked all of it. Like, I thought it was just going to be, it was up to me to go and conquer what I was going to conquer, but it was all up to me. And I think for most people, taking that initiative and then doing it, not just one day, right? Doing it every single day, especially when things get hard, that's the hard part. And especially in those initial days when you don't have a project, you don't have capital, you don't have contractors, you don't have the resources, how do you figure it all out? So I just kept meeting people, like-minded people, and getting inspired. And I think that was a game changer for me. Even my first deal and the way I got it was because I knew someone from my Nordstrom days that was in escrow and title, and he knew a friend who was flipping a house, and the friend that he was flipping a house with agreed to meet with me and walk his project. And so I did that. And then he introduced me to his friend that was a real estate broker that worked for a real estate investment company that did acquisitions and listbacks. And that's how I found my first deal.
I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a girl. By the way, I just wanted to mention something for those of you that use excuses to not ever do anything in life. Like I came here and I don't know if she just breezed right through this.
I heard it.
The language. I knew the language, but I just didn't know the culture. Yes.
I was like, wow. Anyway, well, it's still equally
What I
impressive.
didn't know was a currency, though. I didn't know what a nickel and a dime even looked like.
Wow. But also going to a different culture is a big deal. And then also learning the language of real estate is a big deal. And I think that's a huge leap as well. So anyway.
You mentioned something before. I want to go way back. When we first started this, you said, I started working this corporate job, which it sounds like you were sort of working a corporate job in India before you got here. But you sort of had this aha moment that made you think corporate wasn't right. Like, what was that aha moment? Was it the ad that you heard on the radio? Was it I lived in Seattle and I wanted to blow my brains out every time I got my orange freaking anywhere? Was it that? What was it? The clock in, clock out? What was it that just made you say enough is enough and I'm looking for something else?
It's such a good question. I have two answers. One is, in those last days of corporate, I was at a birthday party for one of my VPs and everybody in that room was just so happy and excited at where they were. They were like, I just got my 7-year block. I just got my 15-year block. And they had been there for 15, 30 years doing the same thing. And I was just like, shoot me now. Like, if I had to do this job one more day without feeling like I'm part of a community giving back, I would not have accomplished anything. Like, where am I building a legacy? How am I being important? Like, I don't know. It was just bizarre.
It sounds like you saw your future in these other employees and didn't like what you saw.
And I was like, no way. Second, back in those days at Nordstrom, we would get our checks every couple weeks. And how it would be is our office administrator would go down to HR and she would bring a bunch of checks back and then she would distribute them every 2 weeks. And it just so happened that one day there was an envelope with my check. It was addressed to me. I opened it, took it out, and I was like, oh, this is not my check. It was my VP's check that came to me by mistake. So I saw how much she was making, and I was like, that's all she makes?
I bought this girl a birthday present? She should be buying me a birthday present, right? Is that
No,
what you
but
thought?
it was so little, like compared to the work that she did.
Oh, too. Okay.
You know, she led the whole nation of stores, 116 stores plus an online store, and she made so little. And I was like, okay, it's going to take me about a good 10 to 15 years to get to where she is. And then this is all I'm going to make.
I think Mitch had an epiphany too. You were a project manager, right? And they were like, look, I got the gold watch. And I think you were at an awards banquet and you started drinking and you just yelled at your boss or something. You became an angry drunk.
I was like, man, I'm just gonna be here till I die because all I want to do is get that watch, you know. And he's like, oh, you're leaving, aren't you? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm out of here. Well, and then it's like he sat me down and maybe you had a similar experience, but it's like I got a raise and my raise was under inflation that year, and I'm like, okay, at what point do we just give ourselves a raise? At what point do you just take control? So I love that. So was it soon after that you received that check that you were like, look, I got to do something different? Or what was the timeline there?
Yeah, I think within that week, like the check and the party all happened in the same week. And then the following week, I was driving to work. That's when I heard the radio ad. And then I think that was April. And then in May, I quit my job. I still gave them like a good 5 weeks because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So take all the time that you need. And they were like, we don't want to let you go. So I just gave them a lot of time. So then I actually quit my job in June and I had my first flip in September.
Let's get a little tactical. How did you find that first property? Kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, a lot of people go to these seminars, they even pay for the paid, the upsell, and then they do nothing. Maybe they read the pamphlet or something, but they don't actually go and buy a property. So tactically, I'm curious, what did you do from that seminar to actually taking action on your first deal?
Like I said, I networked a lot. And then I eventually, when this company that I was finally like in touch with, it was a distressed property acquisition company. they said, oh, there's a flip. It was in Shoreline, which is, it's a really good neighborhood in Seattle. And they were like, but you have to buy this sight unseen. And we think the rehab budget's about 65 grand and we will give you our project manager and contractor to work on your flip. I was like, dream come true, let's buy it. So I didn't know that I shouldn't have bought a deal sight unseen. But anyway, I did it. Right after I closed on it, they were like, oh, we're so sorry, but our project manager is super busy and our contractor is super busy. You're on your own. And then I started interviewing my own contractors and the rehab was not 65 grand. It was 125 grand. And so I was like, okay, this is a challenge. Great. I'm up for it. I interviewed 14 contractors, picked the guy that was going to teach me over all the other cheaper ones, more expensive ones. I was like, okay, this is a guy I can learn from. That's why I picked him. So I picked him. We did the deal. Took about 3 months to flip the house. And then I put it on the market. Week of Thanksgiving. Terrible timing. And then, of course, December was just dead. And then January 3rd, we had like 3 offers. And I didn't make money. I lost 5 grand, but I could have lost 100 grand. But by just showing up to work every day and just hustling through this project, I was able to minimize that loss.
I'd argue, what was that 5 grand worth in education? I mean, that's
priceless.
How'd you pay for the house? Just curious, like, did you go hard money or what are you like?
I had no money. But we owned a really nice house. And so we did a HELOC on the house, took 150 grand and used that to kind of bootstrap the business.
Awesome. So you learned a ton. You're like, okay, you can execute, by the way. Now, you're not sure if you can execute for a profit because you lost 5 grand. But now at this point, are you like, okay, I'm going to go flip other homes? What does your business look like? What did it grow into?
After I still do this to this day, every project I buy, I sit down with myself after the house is closed on the day that it closes. And I kind of go back and look at all my learnings, my wins, my weaknesses and all of that. And so I did that like from the first house. So I finished the project and I was like, oh my God, that was the best experience I've ever had in my life. If I could actually turn a profit, I can do this forever.
So then what did the next deal look like? Because I think some people would lose money. I've watched people do this. They lose money on a flip and they're like, I'm never flipping again. I've watched people buy one rental. They get a bad tenant and they're like, I'm never doing this again.
Leka wouldn't know anything about having a bad tenant at all or bad squatters. I do want to get into that story.
Yeah. So the next flip that I bought was from a no-name wholesaler and I made 35 grand. And then I made 25 on the next one and 35 on the next one. And then I got cocky like most people do. Then I was like, oh, I could take anything and make a profit. And so I did my next 10 deals, made me a total of like 100 grand total. And it was the worst, I think, execution ever, because at that point I was like, I'm just going to buy anything that's a flip. And so that was also a great learning experience because I was like, okay, I'm never doing that again. So then the following year, what I did was I was like, okay, here are all the mistakes I made on these last 10 homes. How am I going to take this and make it a win? So the following year, I only bought 2 houses and each of them made a profit of 150 grand. And we're talking 2015, 2016. So that was like a big turning point. I started to underwrite deals differently. I started to have different needs and wants. And since then, I've had a good ride.
Were those homes like luxury homes or what price point when you made the 150? Were you buying like $500,000 and then selling for, or what was it? What'd that look like?
Honestly, they were not like super luxury. They were very like mid, I would say. I was buying them for $350, $400. You can't get a deal for $400 today, but back then for $400, fixing it up for $100, $125, selling for $800.
I'd argue that you work less probably that year than you did the previous year. But those principles can translate to even our world on the buy and hold real estate, where you see a lot of people want to do a lot of deals, a lot of underwriting, a lot of transactions, a lot of closing. Then you're managing a lot of properties where we're always talking about like maybe go buy a bigger deal and, wait and Mitch says this all the time, be a sniper, like wait for the right deal, work a fraction as much, make exponentially more money than you would have I would argue that those lessons can be applied anywhere. Plus the lesson of just like being introspective and looking at your mistakes. I love how you said, how can I make this a win? How can I go back and sort of recap what I did and what I did right and what I did wrong? I mean, that again, these are just like, I'll also take risks and learn from those risks, learn from mistakes and look at it through the glass is half full. So it's weird how I think we've heard some of these principles before. So kudos to you. I'm curious, when did you start doing some buy and hold stuff? Was that simultaneous to this?
Unfortunately, no. That's the one thing I would change about my career is should have been holding more properties back in the day when things were much cheaper, interest rates were lower, all that good stuff. But I started holding properties in 2017. I bought my first buy and hold. And since then, I have about 40 units. They're 40 units that I own just by myself. They're not syndicated. There's also syndicated units, but these are not syndicated. It's a huge difference. And they're all in the greater Seattle market, which is a hot rental and real estate market.
Yeah, Leka, I want to talk about that transition. So a lot of our listeners, a lot of our elite mastermind members, they're very focused on buy and hold cash flow real estate. Some of them are recovered flippers or recovering flippers. And I have never, ever met a flipper that hasn't said, I should have held more of these. I should have kept more of these. There's a difference between making money and building wealth. We had Tarl on the show and, he's a mutual friend of ours. Same thing. He's like, I should have been holding some of these. So I'm curious to both the mindset shift when you decided to start holding some of these properties, but also tactically how you transition just from flipping to buying and holding some of these properties.
So I don't think I've even now transitioned from flipping to buying and holding, but I do hold more properties. And like Mitch does, I wait for the right deal. If I can buy it super cheap, fix it up, it's all under market value, and I can force equity, then those are the deals that I'm holding. So it was so much easier to cash flow before. It's a lot harder to cash flow now. I have to get super creative, and there has to be a reason for me to hold a property because they don't cash flow. And if I'm putting in money every month, I'm like, okay, this has to make sense. But I think it just so happened that I bought one house that was so distressed and it was in a really good rental market. I put some money to fixing it up. So I bought the deal for $125. It's a single family home. I put $25,000 to fix it up. But this is what blew my mind. I went to refinance. I did the money with cash. When I went to refinance the property into a conventional loan, the bank did something called a cash out refinance. And instead of giving me just the $150 that I had invested, they gave me $160,000. And I was like, wait, you're giving me money to hold on to a property that's going to cash flow? Like, that's insane. And that kind of was the premise for all the properties that I own today. They've all been BRRRRs. Like, I buy them, rehab, rent, and refinance. And it's the only way to even buy real estate in Seattle.
So is that how you're buying all your holds right now? Are you buying them for cash or are you using some private money and hard money as well and then refining them into long-term debt?
Oh, yeah. No. Right now, I buy them with hard money and then I use private money as a bridge and then refinance into long-term. And even then, if I would have to take some money for down. So either I would do that or just bring one investor and, they would fund the down. I don't do that often. Like, I don't like having long-term partners. So I'm okay with like short-term flip partners, but not long-term. But that's how I can still do this.
I actually love this. We focus really on buy, hold, long-term real estate, which is sort of the 0 to 100 philosophy. However, we've also talked about pairing a flipping strategy that provides fast cash, right? Because it's a different model. Flipping is a job. Long-term hold is a long-term sort of investing for freedom. But like for people just starting out, pairing the two together, I think can be compelling.
Yeah, it's a killer strategy and you have to do it because trust me, owning as many rentals as I do, I feel like I would be a lot wealthier today if I didn't have my rentals because all of my net worth is in my rentals and I can't eat net worth. So I have all of this awesome equity, but the problem is it costs money to hold real estate. And so if I wasn't constantly flipping and making active income or selling real estate, like I can't literally can't fund my long-term investments.
And I think it depends on what those investments look like, right? With your model, I see how it makes a lot of sense because also, you look at where you leave your job, you don't have any money, and we fast forward. I get it. There's a lot of stories there and hardships, but also you own 40 homes in the Seattle area. I mean, the equity that you hold today is generational wealth. Now, also, what does your future look like, right? Do you offload some of those and go into higher cash flow? Who knows, right? Maybe there's a goal there, but as you grow that, you have options at least. And Dave always says it. It's like, I have way more options today. I'm in a much better place because I did what I did and I invested in real estate. So anyway, I love how you took the fast cash into long-term growth and you paired the two together.
So you mentioned it's cost money to hold a real estate. I mean, we see that. We've got a portfolio of mobile home parks and a hotel and some other stuff. And some properties just spit out positive cash flow like clockwork every month. There's other properties that spit out cash flow for a few months and bam, CapEx, and it's a headache and it irritates you. And you say that it costs money to hold real estate. Are you actually feeding these 40 rentals on a monthly basis? Or are you talking about it's like, oh, there's a roof, there's a hot water heater. I gotta come out of pocket and do these CapEx projects. That's my first question. Are you feeding them that way? And the second question though, and I'm assuming the answer is yes, is the equity though. The equity growth certainly outpaces the money that you're putting into these on an annual basis.
Yeah, the only reason I hold my properties in Seattle is because of appreciation. You appreciate way faster than I actually feed the properties. And feeding the properties comes from a tenant not paying or a roof leak or some minimal thing. I also don't like holding long-term rentals until I have completely fixed them up. So I'm kind of I don't know if I'm different or what, but I like completely renovating my properties, like quartz countertops, backsplashes, all the bells and whistles before I list them for rent. And the reason I do that is because I don't want to deal with the one-off issues that keep arising.
You get better tenants.
And you get better tenants, better rent, better tenants, all of it.
I love that. So you said you have 40 single family houses that you hold.
No, I have everything from single family, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and apartments.
Oh, okay. What's your largest property on your apartment complex that you hold?
12 units, 130 units in Orlando that I'm part of the GP team and we syndicated that.
And I want to get into the syndication because you had mentioned that in a second. On the 40 units, my question to you is I'm assuming this 12plex is also in Seattle. How would you, for our listeners out there that are sort of trying to figure out what asset class to go into, how would you compare your 12 unit apartment complex pros and cons to single family houses or maybe, a duplex, smaller properties?
So the 12 unit apartment complex will cash flow. It'll cash flow in your sleep because it costs cheaper and then you probably will get the same amount of rent. Your single families will probably not cash flow, especially if one tenant doesn't pay and the cash flow is basically dried out. But it's so much easier to liquidate a single family than it is to liquidate apartments. Apartment appreciation is not great. And then it's dependent on income, cap rates, local macro and microeconomics, so many things going on. A single family is just, everybody wants to live in a single family. So if you do it right price, right design, make it look cute.
Leka, how are you finding most of your deals? I mean, you talked about network. I know you're very well networked. In fact, you're maybe one of the most well networked people I know. You seem to know everyone and be everywhere. But how are you sourcing these particular deals, both in Seattle and then I also want to hear about, your capital raise for, you said 120 units in Orlando as well.
When I first started investing in real estate, I realized that I was not good at direct mail campaigns or door knocking or any of that. I didn't know how to go up to a seller and say, sell me your house, I'll give you cash. Why would they want to sell it to me? I had no experience. So what I did was I interviewed and networked with like-minded people. That included wholesalers, real estate brokers, other investors. And that was the best way for me to find really good deals. And my pipeline is so full. I tell you guys a funny story. Last month, a woman reached out to me. She's like, hey, I've been to a lot of your networking meetups and your walkthroughs, and I was wondering if you know any investor that would maybe want to buy a house in Education Hill in Redmond. And I was like, I live on Education Hill in Redmond. And then I was like, yeah, I would like to buy it. She's like, seriously? I said, yeah. And then she said, it was kind of a personal story. It was her niece that, had inherited this property. It was going into foreclosure. She just wanted a quick sale. So I ended up going there, making a really fair offer. We went in the contract, bought the house. During that process, my hard money lender needed an appraisal. So he went and got an appraisal. I was buying the house for $1,085,000 and the house appraised for 1.7, and the as-is appraisal came in at 1.3. And that deal was purely sourced through my network.
Such a great example of network. I mean, I feel like we say it over and over and over, and it's hard, I feel like, for new investors to understand how important building their network truly is and how important those relationships really are. I mean, I've always been a big advocate of tell everybody what you're looking for. And it sounds like this woman also understood. She reached out to you and said, hey, do you know anyone that would be interested? And you just happened to be the person who was interested in buying it. And if you weren't, you probably knew someone that you could have handed that off to.
Leka, were you the thought leader? I guess we call that a thought leader. Were you the ones putting the meetup on? Like, were you the leader of that meetup, or were you just an attendee? Yeah, that makes a big difference when you're we say this to people that are just getting started. They don't want to do a meetup or start a meetup because they feel like they're not qualified to. Come with like 3 questions and create a roundtable discussion, maybe bring in a guest speaker. But if you're the one coordinating the meetup, people are immediately going to look to you as a thought leader. Hence, they're the ones that they're going to reach out to when they have a deal that they want to sell.
Yes, but I've also seen people like sell deals to other investors in my meetup because they're like, oh, she's so busy and she has all these other deals, so let's not bother her. But that's okay. It's okay. It's the one-offs.
You had mentioned earlier, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this because we've talked about this on the show before. So Mitch is my business partner, unfortunately. And you had mentioned earlier that, I'm joking, I love Mitch. I hardly dig on the guy anymore on this show. So I have to do it every once. I used to be really, and people got really uncomfortable with that. So
yeah, people were like, man, this is abuse.
Like, I get it, Travis, they get it. But why would you do that? No,
but I can see to your audience that I've seen the two of you in action and you guys complement each other so well. And you're like just such a breath of fresh air and to hang around. So you guys lucked it. Both of you did.
I will admit, I do enhance Mitch's life quite a bit. So but you did mention partnerships. You go, I rarely do partnerships, only on short-term stuff. And I agree, like partnerships can blow up and be awful emotionally, spiritually, financially. And I know Gabe has some light partnerships. He does some co-investing with people, but not like Mitch and I. Why do you say that? Why are you anti-partnerships? Did something happen? What advice would you give to our listeners that are thinking about partnering with people?
Okay. So it all comes down to me and it's my fault, but I wake up every day and I'm like, I don't feel like doing this to this property, or I want to do this to this property. I want to add 1,000 square foot addition, or I want to do something else. And it's like my decision. And having done that over and over and over again, over hundreds of deals, analyzing over 10,000 deals, I have realized that A, I don't need a partner, and B, I would probably still direct that partner and drive them insane. And so my best and favorite partnership is when I'm actually mentoring someone, and I do this a lot. I raise a lot of money. I've raised over 35 million over the last 10, 11 years. And this is only when I need to raise money that I raise money. And so by raising capital, a lot of people have mastermind groups or education that, they sell. I am not great at that. What I would rather do is do like one-on-one coaching with people and make sure that I'm taking them from point A to point Z and then leaving them be. So a lot of my partnerships are people that want to learn to flip a house or people that want to learn to invest in real estate. They invest in either my personal fund or my flips. And what they get in return is, of course, they make equity or debt, interest payments or equity in the deal, but they also get to learn. Like I will hold them accountable, most of my investors are younger techies or techies with money that just want to do something different and, invest in other kinds of assets. And so a lot of people, I'm proud to say, they partner with me and then they quit their jobs and then they go into flipping a house or they go into buying rentals. Like I just sold someone at Microsoft last year 2 apartment buildings and she bought them while she was pregnant, had the baby, all the good stuff that comes along with it, was buying real estate. And I'm like, if she can do it, no one else has a reason not to. And so that's really the way that I bring on partners.
More of a mentorship relationship than a 50-50 or whatever. So yeah, it gives you that agency to make your own decisions. I mean, you're a very independent person. I think that's amazing how just even speaking with you, you're just a strong person. And I can tell that you're like, that's how you approach your business. You're like, look, I know what to do. I know how to analyze. I know how to make these decisions. Why do I need somebody else muddying the water, right? Whereas Travis is very weak, and so he needs a lot of support.
Curious what drive you today. We talked about having a strong why. It seemed like early on it was quickly to get out of that corporate job, but you did that fast and you found success. But I'm curious, is it the same why today, or what is it that drives you today to keep growing bigger and doing more?
I think my why today is to inspire my kids. My kids, I have 2 boys, 8 and 12, and I want them to see me as being strong, independent, successful, and most importantly, having a work ethic. I think that's just so important for little kids to see. My mom and dad work hard. They fight for everything we have. And well, they're here to support us and take care of us. I think that's my why.
I love that you said that because I feel like there's been this sort of, going off the subject of real estate for a second, I feel like there's been this culture shift where even we're guilty of that, like lifestyle and freedom and come and go and do what you want. And, and there's also been this time is precious and don't work and spend all your time, playing pickleball or hanging out with the kids, which is awesome. Like work-life balance and spending quality time with the kid, that's absolutely important. But it's also important for your kids to see you work. And we tell our kids that. They're like, because we choose to do stuff and work on projects because we don't have to. First of all, I'd go crazy if I didn't have something to do. But the kids say that, like, well, Dad, you don't, right? You could just not work. And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, you should always be productive. You should always be, doing something. And I love that you said that because I feel like the pendulum is swung a little bit the other way in society and what we should be teaching our kids or modeling for our kids. And I think it's really, really important for your kids just not to see the end game, right? They need to see the process too and appreciate that.
Yeah. And also I don't believe in giving them anything on a silver platter. Like a lot of my friends, ultra high net worth, have these beautiful homes. And my kids are always like, when are we moving? Why don't we have a home like that? And I was like, let me do a drive around for you. And I put them in my car and I drove them around the city. And I was like, you own that building, you own this house, and you own this apartment building. And they were like, really? I was like, yeah, really. So it doesn't matter. Like, you work hard, you're not going to get it easy. You're still going to have to manage a rental portfolio.
We do talk about lifestyle design. We talk about time freedom, all of those things, which are important, but hard work's also important. I think that as little kids, though, seeing their parents have options, right? Like have the ability to take time off and go travel, but also the ability to go, hey, let's do this project. Let's work. Let's put our head down. I think that we know a lot of kids grow up and they see their parents go to a job that they can't stand every day. And there's resentment there and they're tired and I'd love to go to your baseball game, buddy, but I can't make it. Or I'd love to go on vacation, but we can't afford it, but we can't. So I don't think hard work in itself is bad, but having the option paired in parallel with hard work is an interesting thing. And my kids are seeing it. All of your kids are seeing it, where it's like dad or mom are working hard, but man, when they're there, they're there. When we want to go somewhere, we do it. When we want to, and so I think the option, is probably the most important thing at least in my opinion.
Well, real estate's allowed all of us to have freedom, and freedom, it means choices, right? And I think what we do with our time is, it's different for everybody, but it really comes down to the time and also more choices with how you spend that time. Leka, what are you most excited about today? I mean, you've done a lot in a short period of time. You've flipped a lot of homes. You're buying and holding homes. You're raising capital. But what are you most excited about today, looking forward?
Okay, so I don't know if you guys identify with this, but as real estate investors, I just feel like we often feel so poor. And we always feel poor because you sell an asset, you get a bunch of money, and then it just goes towards buying another asset. And the cycle is constant. I think what I'm most excited for this next phase in my career is to stop the bleeding and just make money. And I think I have allowed myself to get here because I have done everything that I have to do. I've seen the risks that you have to take and what that then leads to. The amount of debt you can rack up, the amount of risk you can rack up, and then the market shifts or there's like a pandemic, and then what happens? So luckily, like Gabe was saying, I think before we started recording the podcast, that because of the equity that you have in your real estate portfolio, you kind of feel more stable today. And it's because of all the hard work put. I'm in that same place where I feel stable because I took that 150 grand and I blew it up and I'm worth millions of dollars today. And it's that equity that if something were to go wrong in the business or the universe, I can leverage that equity. And to have that kind of stability, I think is like incredible. And now that I've allowed myself to have that, I'm like, okay, there's no need to keep on taking the risks. Instead, I can do something where I just make money and I don't have to put up all the risk. That's what I'm like super excited about.
What does that look like tactically? Like that resonates with me, quite a bit. I'm really this year really focused on optimizing my current portfolio. There's many years where it's buy as many assets as I can. And I think there's value in that, but there's also a time to look within your current assets and go, okay, where can I optimize? It's actually a better use to, maybe put some time, energy, money into this property versus go out and deploy into a new deal. I know I'm selling off some of my smaller stuff. I'm looking at ways to optimize some of the stuff I own. What are you doing to, as you say, stop the bleed and kind of optimize your current portfolio?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm doing the same thing. I'm looking within my portfolio and saying, okay, where have I maxed out on my equity that I just think I should sell this asset because it's not doing me any favors and I can't grow this anymore. I've maxed out. And so I'm looking at selling some assets and then also just going into, like I said, luxury real estate and selling luxury real estate where I could make the same amount of money selling a house as I would if I flipped a house that took a year to flip. And
by the way, if you want to buy or sell luxury real estate in Seattle, man, Leka's the one. Look at this energy. If you want someone to kick ass for you, whether you're listing a house or buying a house, go check out Leka. She'll totally hook you up. And I love that you said that. This has actually been a theme. Mitch and I have been talking about this. I think we spoke about this a couple weeks ago. We had a guest on the show that was speaking about it. Mitch wasn't here because he was being a slacker and things like that. But this guy was talking about that.
I think he was actually hanging out with his family, enjoying his time freedom, Travis.
Thank you,
being
Gabe.
a slacker, exactly.
Thank you, Gabe. Appreciate you.
Mitch should prioritize me 0 to 100 in the podcast.
Yeah, I know. We know how this goes, Travis.
Right.
Anyway.
No, but this, Gabe, this has been sort of a theme where a lot of people, including us, have said, never sell, just buy. And you're right. You can't eat net worth. And you also don't necessarily, maybe your cash on equity is really low. You got tens of millions of dollars in equity, but you've got, 3% cash on equity. At some point, you have to enjoy life and you have to, sort of reap the rewards. And sometimes, and same thing with the commercial real estate, where we have some properties where we've maxed out the net operating income. We've maxed out the valuation. Your single family houses, maybe your point, they're maxed out, or maybe your apartment complex is maxed out. And so at some point, and the guy that was on this show a couple of weeks ago, I forget who it was exactly, but he said, you're going to grow your wealth a heck of a lot faster by maybe cycling some of those assets out. And so sell it, maybe cash out, maybe pay some taxes, or maybe 1031 exchange, maybe not, maybe actually, but then you can take that cash and then deploy that, maybe take some and go on a trip and enjoy your life, and then take the other app. And then roll it into maybe an asset that has a lot more runway. And then you're going to, it's the velocity of capital we talk about. How quickly can you move cash into an asset, force appreciate it, right? Roll that cash back out, enjoy some of that cash, but then roll it into another asset where you got a lot more runway.
Exactly. I love that. You work so hard to not enjoy life. Like, you deserve that. And so if you sell some of it off, make $1 million in equity and like walk away from that, and somehow that'll improve your life 10x, then all about it.
It'll feel a little puppy. You're like, gosh, wow, got $1 million in the bank. I'm going to go do something.
But also, it's like, I think there's phases, right? In the very beginning, you're like, I don't have anything. I'm not worth anything. So you got to go find all these deals, and then you're shoveling back the profits or the cash flow back in your portfolio. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you're worth millions of dollars, and you're like, hold on a second. Like, I'm cash poor, but I'm equity rich, right? I've got some cash flow. That's great, whatever. But like, do I want to tap that equity? Do I want to build a house? Do I want to go travel the world? Do I want to, and again, it goes all the way back, I think, to that initial conversation. Like, now you have options, real options and real equity that you can either pull and tap or roll into something else, higher cash flow, and or go, follow your dreams and go achieve something even greater. So yeah, I'm thinking about that in my career over the last 5 or 6 years. It's been like, I just take everything, I shovel it right back in, which is great. But now I'm like going, okay, what do I want to unlock and what I want to do with that? Because I'm no longer where you were, where you just left your job and you have $0, right? So anyway, I think it's an interesting conversation.
And tomorrow's not promised by any means. And a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to hand this amazing, portfolio to my kids, right? Well, how many properties have we bought from the kids, right? That don't want it, A. And B, maybe your kids would actually want to spend that time with you while you're alive, enjoying your youth and your health, as opposed to you handing them a rental portfolio. So yeah, I think, man, lots of shifts. I know we're getting to the top. Yeah, I have one question for you really fast. What got you into this 128 unit? And like, somebody that's listening going, wait a minute, she went from like single family houses, maybe some small apartment complexes. Oh, and then 120 unit in Florida. Like, whoa, wait, what happened? How do you make that shift?
Super funny story. It was the pandemic. I was bored. And every time
There was a pandemic? I'm sorry, was there
nothing like
I was
like
bored.
A bored investor.
I was bored, so I bought 120 units on the other side of the country.
A bored investor is the most dangerous person out there, by the way.
I'm like, I have to go put myself in front of a learning curve.
Sounds
and
easy.
Also, at the same time, I got super active on LinkedIn. And there's not many single family fix and flippers on LinkedIn. It's more the commercial real estate investment groups. And so I started to research a lot. I started to learn a lot. I started becoming more and more active on LinkedIn. And then my network changed from fix and flip single family to multifamily, buy and hold, large scale developers, investors, all of that. And what they were doing was so exciting because think about this. This is 2020. You're buying a 130 unit for 2.5 to 3% interest. Commercial real estate was selling for so high. Interest rates were so cheap. Cap rates were so low. I'm like, this is an amazing asset class. So again, someone from my network introduced me to a group. And the first person I met in the group was the underwriter. And we spent 4 months underwriting a deal. And he would walk me through the process. And I learned more underwriting that deal than I ever had in my career before. So we underwrote that deal. Great deal. It's in Maitland, right where Disney is headquartered. And so we ended up buying it. It's actually 160 units for $30 million. And they put $2 million of CapEx. And so I was like, how can I get involved? And then I met his partners and they were GPs and they had about $500 million of assets under management. They'd done this super successfully. They were hiring the best property managers nationally. Like the whole thing was so fun. Most importantly, these operators were extremely nerdy and they had the same vibe as me, which was super awesome to see. Like they just had all the answers. They were geeking out on this. Like I was like, this is amazing. So I said, okay, the best way to do this is if I was on their GP team. So I raised capital for them and I also helped them design their units. So we took it from kind of grungy and boring to modern, bright, just like perfect for like that newer age renter. And and that's almost coming to an end. I think we are primed to sell next year or refinance or do something big. But it's been great to just, give that fleck to my investors every other month. It's been amazing. Our good friend Ben Hansen invested in that deal. Charles invested in the deal. So I got some really good people to come invest, and it's going great.
So find people nerdier than yourself to want to invest in large amounts of real estate.
Nerds are the best. Surround yourself with nerds. That's what I say all the time. Surround yourself with lots and lots of nerds. Yeah. I keep saying one last question. I'm curious. You had a kind of a nightmare story. A lot of people that, I had a bad tenant. I had to fix a toilet at 3 a.m. Real estate's not for me. And those people, you're like, really? Like, you had to fix a toilet or you had to run an application? Oh, dang, that's really hard. Leka had a nightmare story. And I don't want to get into like the nitty gritty, but you basically, make sure I understand this right. Was it one of your rental houses or was it a fix and flip? It was a rental house.
It was my fourplex.
Okay. And was it a tenant that moved in and wouldn't move out?
Yeah, tenant moved out. And so my property manager listed this unit for sale. And the next thing we knew, squatters had broken the locks, come inside, started living in the house, and told us we had no right to kick them out because they had a legal rental agreement with someone on Craigslist.
I found out about this, Leka, because my good friend George McCleary he created a kind of satire video of how to break into homes in the Pacific Northwest and live for free. And it went viral. But it was a satire based off of your story. He ended up on Dr. Phil. And
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. And
I was like, you go, George, you go.
Yeah. And then I found out this was actually your real life story. So
I heard about a guy that like his mom's house, somebody broke into his mom's house and was living there squatting. Did you hear about that guy?
So he actually runs a business now on how to take squatters out. And he was someone that I paid to consult with when my squatters were at home.
You have to take the law in your own hands because you have no right. Like, that's why when we always like, don't invest in landlord unfriendly states. I would say that Washington or Seattle, specifically Portland, are pretty hostile. Not just like unfriendly, but like damn right hostile to landlords, which are people that are providing don't get me going. I hate this shit. But so tell us the story. Like, how did you, obviously you can't rely on the law because they're completely useless. Not that the law is useless, but their hands were tied because of these asinine rules that give basically criminals rights. So because I've heard some pretty creative stories about how people are getting people like this out because you can't call the police. So like, how did you get these guys out?
So I created a video and posted it on my social media. It went viral. We had like 1 million views, but my friends started sending it to the local news media. And so 2 channels picked it up. One of them decided to do a documentary on this from start to finish, how it goes. And so they were really involved and into this story. They ended up publishing the story during the NFL, like right after the NFL. It was a big deal. And so in Seattle, it was great. And so they were obviously invested. I also hired an amazing attorney, and she had connections to the prosecutor's office and the Seattle Police Department because the SPD basically said that this was a civil case, like they had nothing to do with it. So it was all in my hands. So what I did, like I sat outside the house, like there's so many things like you have to take it into your own hands. Otherwise, no one's going to help you. So I camped outside. I waited for the mailman. The mailman showed up. These squatters had even changed like the mailing address into their names. And we professionals, like we didn't know their names. We didn't know who they were. So the way to find that out, like I sat outside and I waited for the mailman. And then I told the mailman that this was my building and that these people had unlawfully entered and now I couldn't enter. And he was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. I can't give you this mail, but you can take photos. So I took photos of the mail. We got the name of the squatter from there. My attorney then sent it to the prosecutor's office, who then did a background check on these people, and they found a criminal offense against the woman. And then they sent it to the police department, and then the police reached out to me and said, okay, now that we have like a criminal case against them, this can be a criminal case, not just a civil.
Do you think this prosecutor would have done anything to help you had it not been so public on the news, etc.? They just like ignore you because why? They have no...
I mean, also at that point, I had just come off the Bigger Pockets, emceeing the Bigger Pockets stage. And so my attorney told the Seattle Police Department that I was famous. And so they were like, oh my gosh, like we have to get her squatters out. So they literally met with me down the street.
All right, we're street of this house. Nobody knows who we are.
Yeah, we're not famous. Yeah.
It kills, like it actually helps to have social media and to have a following and put yourself out there, because in situations like this, it really helps. So then I ended up going with the police in their Jeep. We went to the house. We knocked on the door. Luckily, both squatters were in the house. And the police had to break the door down and go inside. They handcuffed the squatters and took them in the police van back to the cop station. Then when I walked, and then the media somehow got wind that the police were going there. So they were outside with cameras. They caught all this on camera. But this is what like truly is so crazy. So the reporter and we went inside the house for the first time after the squatters had left. It was full of designer clothes, shoes, handbags. But right in the middle of the living room was a stripper pole. They had installed a stripper pole.
This sounds like the house, Travis, that you said you went to when you were in Seattle last.
Yep. You know what that's a different podcast.
Isn't that spot you frequent, Travis?
That's like, yeah, right. Well, so isn't it sad that it takes a social media following and influence to actually have the law work for you? If someone asked you, should I buy single family houses as rentals in Seattle? Are you like, hell no, I'm selling them, I'm holding them? Or are you just like, look, this is just part of doing business. I've made a lot of money in this market. And, obviously you're not deterred.
I think the appreciation outweighs a squatter. So I would still be like, go buy where if it's in your backyard, you know what to do. If you can handle a situation like this, then there's no reason for you not to buy. And yeah, you'll still make millions of dollars on the back end.
I'd agree. I have a little sixplex I bought for tax purposes in Hood River, which is it's a little resort town in Oregon. But anyway, the sixplex, at first I was really hesitant. I'm like, man, Oregon, we tell everybody, no, you have no rights. It's socialist, communist here, whatever your political affiliation is. But yeah, the appreciation has been phenomenal. And they're A-class apartments. So I have like really great tenants. That's fantastic. There's cash flow, there's equity, there's a little of both. Sometimes people invest for cash flow. Sometimes people invest for equity. It kind of depends on where you're at in your journey. So anyway, yeah. Who wants to take Leka out here with the final question? I know she listens to our podcast.
She's too famous. Well, before the final question, Leka, did you get to keep all the designer clothes? I know that you...
It's a great question.
Good question.
I did not. I just wanted everything out of there. So I hired a junk removal team to come and take it all out of there. So it was like, burn some sage because it was all stolen, obviously. And so what I did after was I stripped the apartment down to the studs, and it was a single, like one big unit, and I converted that into 2 units. Redid everything and just raised my rents.
All right. Our final question that we ask all our guests every week. If you were to lose it all, so this includes all your real estate, all your money, your net worth, and also your network. So you've lost it all. You're sitting out on the curb. You have the knowledge, but you've lost everything else. What's the first thing you do?
This is such a good question. And I've thought about this over and over and over again since I started doing this. I honestly believe if you've done it once, you can do it again. I would go back to the roots. What worked for me, what didn't work for me. And guess what? Second time, Leka 2.0 will be that much stronger and that much wiser. And I think I would make this even better, accelerate much faster if I had to do this all over again.
Awesome. Well, appreciate having you on the show. I appreciate you being on here and sharing all your wisdom and knowledge and experience. I'm excited for this episode to air.
Thank you, guys. I'm looking forward to hanging out again in person some point soon.